Hello, welcome along to a brand new episode of Writer's Routine. This week, chatting to the Uplit author Faith Hogan. Faith has won writing awards, worked all manner of jobs, and is a global bestseller. She's back with a new novel, The Women at Ocean's End. We talk about finding her voice, also why she needs a character and a place to start, and then is happy pantsing along with it.
I knew where I wanted it to go, and I knew where I wanted that character's legacy to end up. And I suppose once I had that, and I had the island, it was like a clean slate, and that was exciting in some ways. And it also gave me lots of scope for kind of meandering down paths as I wrote. And those paths will often bring you to twists in the road of your plot. And if you follow them, you can either end up sinking at sea, or you can end up with a great story. And thankfully for me, I think I've ended up with a good story at the end of it.
And with many novels in the can now and awards picked up along the way, with a dedicated readership, how does she know what a Faith Hogan novel needs to be?
My readers have always come to my books to escape. And they escape to a place that is, I won't say everything works out well for everybody, but they are uplifting reads. And so when the reader finishes the book, I would hope that they would hug the book to their chest and say, oh. And that is my intention when I write the books, that I make the world for a reader a better place.
It's all on the way in a brand new episode of Writer's Routine. This week's episode of Writer's Routine is sponsored by Faber Academy, whose flagship course is back. It's the Writing a Novel course that you can get onto in person if you're in the UK. It's online as well if you're a little further afield. And it's not just a course, it's a commitment to your craft. Faber Academy is a place where you can learn the essentials of novel writing like no other. Now, this podcast lets you hear from some of the best authors around. This course can help you become one yourself. The comprehensive programme covers everything that you need to bring your novel to life, with so much detail on character, story, structure, plotting, voice, dialogue, conflict, and everything else. Really gets into the nitty-gritty of your craft like no other. Through the course, you'll hear from guest speakers, some of the biggest names in publishing, authors, editors. It's designed to help you find your direction. Now, we've had so many authors on this show who cannot speak highly enough about the Faber Academy, and now it's your chance to become one of them. At the end of the course, part of your work is sent out to agents across the UK. You'll have the chance to pitch your novel to some of the biggest literary agents around too. There are courses in Newcastle and London. There's an online course too that you can take part in wherever you are. Now, you need to be quick to sign up. Deadlines start through late November, where you can learn all the skills needed to really hone your craft. Find out more, faberacademy.com/writing-a-novel, and you can get a link for our episode sponsor, Faber Academy, in the podcast notes wherever you're listening. Yes, welcome along to the show. It's Writer's Routine, where we take a look inside an author's working day. We see how they do things, when, where, and well, what do they do? How do they give themselves the best chance of taking an idea and hopefully getting it read? This week, we're with Faith Hogan, who has published 11 Uplit novels. Her last one, The Bookshop Ladies, was shortlisted for the 2024 and Post Irish Book Awards for Best Popular Fiction Novel of the Year. That's a wordy title. Also, she's won in the Irish Writers' Centre Novel Fair. Was selected as a Words Island winner as well. That's a lot tighter. She's a global bestseller, who has also published crime novels as Geraldine Hogan. Now, the new one is The Women at Ocean's End. It's all about three women, all with secrets waiting to be uncovered, who meet on an island off the Irish coast and come together to save a house that they love and to stop running from their past. Now, Faith has been, busy through the years. We talk about a life filled with many different jobs. A model, an event organiser, she's got multiple degrees. And we discuss how they have all come together to bring her to the point of being a full-time writer. Something that she never really allowed herself to believe could happen. We run through the secrets of uplifting fiction, how she knows her audience so well, and you can hear why she's fine without the internet. Now, if you're enjoying the podcast and you'd like to go behind the scenes, you can do that by following our Substack page more or less every week. I kind of top it up with a little thoughts and just something we can discuss about what you're reading, how you're writing, just something to think through. You can find that in the link wherever you're listening. And let's get into it then with Faith Hogan chatting about her new novel, The Women at Ocean's End.
I write at home. I have an office at the very bottom of the house. It's a west-facing room, but it feels like a north-facing room because it's quite dark. But I think that's actually a good thing. At my back, I have shelves of books, like every other writer probably in the world. I have every book accumulated there. Some I need, some I should really, really recycle, but I can't because I just can't. I write at a desk. It's a 1970s desk that I picked up from a place I used to work. I gave them a contribution of €20, brought it home. My husband did a massive big restoration job on it. I had a Victorian piece of desk before that, but I'm 5'9.5", so my knees kept on. I had more times black knees than I had anything else because I kept on bashing into it. But my new desk, that I call it now, I have it about 5 years. We did a massive job. It's painted. The drawers it's like a tank desk, you know, the old-fashioned tank desks, and I adore. So I sit down there. When I go into the office in the morning, the first thing I do is sit at the desk, and I just think, I'm so lucky to be here. I'm so lucky to be a full-time writer and sitting at this desk that, like, to anybody else, they probably go, oh dear, unfortunate. But I love it. Huge, big, deep drawers. And it's one of those desks that it's got masses of space up on top, so I can lay everything out, you know. I'm a big Joe Malone girl. I like lime, basil and mandarin if I'm writing something new, but I save that only if I'm writing something new. And apart from that, my desk to me is highly organised. To anybody else, they're going to come in and say, gosh, you could do with the tidy up. Yeah.
So candles to start with. You saved this candle for you starting a new novel. When did that start, that particular ritual?
Okay, so I suppose, I suppose as a reader, I read everything. And for a while, I went through phases of reading things about aromatherapy and oils and essential oils and all that. And Joe Malone does a fantastic lime, basil and mandarin candle. And they say that basil sparks creativity and sort of gets the brain going. And I don't know if it does or not, but I've managed to write quite a few books while in the presence of basil burning or just scented in the room. And it's just kind of part of my routine now. I never do it. I never light it if I'm editing. I never light it if I'm doing admin. I never light it if I'm... it's just if I'm writing something new, I'll write it. I never, that room that I use for writing, I never do admin in it, I suppose. I never do anything. I've no Wi-Fi connectivity in it on purpose. My son has set me up with a very basic setup, so I have no Wi-Fi connectivity in that room. So it's very easy to separate admin from actually writing, and I like that. It works.
We'll come to the routine in just a second, but do you notice any other rituals that you find yourself doing? Like you've got the candle when you start a new book. That's a little quirk. Have you got any other perhaps peculiarities just for you?
I don't know. I probably drink far too much coffee. When I write, I use hardback notebooks. I could have 3-4 hardback notebooks at the same time going, and sometimes I look back on the beginning of a novel and at the end of the novel, and the book will have changed so much from start to finish. I think I know exactly what I'm going to write when I sit down, and by the end of it, so my desk will often have quite a number of those hardback books piled up, and they'll be, if I have 2 or 3 things on the go at one time, so I could be writing something but also editing, kind of within kind of the next few weeks, and I'll be just moving one pile to the side and bringing out the other pile, and I don't know if I actually use them to plan or to figure out. I think I figure out stories by hand, but they flow out of me through in the typing, the whole process of the typing.
If you're you kind of can't believe when you finished your novel, you can't believe what it was like in the notebook, so you're not notice it changing as you're writing? No,
it's very organic. It all sort of, I suppose you hear about pansters and plotters, and I suppose I wrote a few crime novels, And they were published a few years ago, and I started off writing crime novels, and I very much planned those. They were planned. I knew what was going to happen. I knew who the baddies were. I knew exactly everything that was going to happen. In my women's fiction books, I tend to just sit and it just sort of flows. But because it just sort of flows, I'll do a draft. And when I get onto my second draft of it, it's completely changed by the end of that from the first version. And I don't think I'd even notice that, Dan, if it wasn't for the fact that I have those notebooks kind of at the side. And sometimes I look back at them and go, oh dear me, where did Mary go? Because Mary was there at the beginning, huge big person in it, and all of a sudden she shrunk. She's now the postman's daughter, you know? So yeah, it's funny. I suppose it's just creativity, isn't it? It's kind of the way it works. It works differently for everybody, I suppose.
And just to touch on how we started, you say that you don't get a lot of light in it. It's quite dark, and that's a good thing.
I think it is, yeah, because so we've got like a fairly good sized garden at the back, but where my window looks out on, it's like almost like I wouldn't call it an alcove, but it's almost like a small courtyard type of an area, and there's very little distraction in it. The most that I will have as a distraction are blackbirds. There's a holly tree just outside. The room used to be a bedroom, so it has an ensuite, and it's quite a size. It's an okay sized room, you know. Have a large chair in the corner that I sit in the mornings if I'm doing a little bit of thinking. I tend to kind of do my thinking in the mornings, and so I'll sit and there'll often be blackbirds, and in wintertime I'll put out a feeder on the thing, and that's just enough distraction, because if I had any more distraction I might not get as much done, you know. So yeah,
I know. It's very good for writers to be completely distraction free, as you say. So you've got this set up without the internet, but also the internet is so intrinsic to everything that we do. All elements of research and maybe notes that you might be taking, things that you need to remember for later. You're perfectly fine writing without it?
Yes, I am. I'm much better. I found a writer there about 2 years ago called Cal Newport. And I've read 2 of his books at this point in time. The first one was, I think, Digital Minimalism, it was called. And the second was called Deep Work. Deep Work is currently in the bookshops, but it really talked about kind of the quality of work you can get done without distractions. And, you know, it changed the way I write. It changed the way I operate, kind of that sort of writing time. I have found I've become much more productive without it. Now, on Wednesdays, I don't write, I do admin. So I move into a separate room, the room I'm currently sitting in, another spare bedroom. And I sit here and I will do social media. I post posts on a Wednesday if I've got stuff that I want to put out there. I'll do my newsletter. I will do any admin that's outstanding. I will do anything for the accountant, any of that. And I do it in a separate room where I have got the computer that is meant to be very trusty, that we're meant to be using today. And I will do all there. Yeah. And I just find I'm much more, I think that the drafts and the work is cleaner. It's less, it's more me, as opposed to kind of being influenced by other things, or worse, distracted, and maybe just, I get twice as much done almost, I think, you know, without it.
You said that you can't believe you're a full-time writer, and having a day of admin and doing everything for the accountant, that's one of the prices that you pay. How much do you enjoy having to do all of those little bits and kind of marketing yourself, whereas 20, 30 years ago that would have been done by, I guess, the publishing house?
Yes, that's true. I don't know if you've ever, I think any writer you're ever going to have on here will enjoy procrastinating. And for me, even though it is a day of work, in many ways it's a day of procrastination, because if I'm on a first draft, I'd be fairly kind of head down and working very hard for the 2 days, and it drains you, you know. Whereas the admin work is light. It's not deep work, it's light work, and it's almost like a rest. I can sit down, have a cup of coffee, do whatever I need to do. At the end of it, I feel as if I'm ready for the following day. I'm ready for Thursday. You know, it gives me kind of just an opportunity to sort of take a break halfway through and get things done, but at the same time not be overloaded, you know. So yeah, no, it works out well. It works out well like that. It has been working out well like that. So hopefully it will continue to work. It'll be a little bit different for the next month or so. I have a new book out, but I do try to kind of timetable things that are not writing related for Wednesdays, so that it sort of means I don't have a reason to procrastinate on the writing, if you know what I mean, on kind of creating stuff.
And you mentioned notebooks, and people who mention notebooks tend to get very into their notebooks and the pens. Have you got preferences? What happens?
I know, I'm fairly easygoing. I'm living in a house where most of the time 3 of my children are away at college. But when they're not, and I have one who still lives with me, who's still in secondary school, every biro that I have is up for grabs. Every pen I have is up for grabs. I have 1 or 2 really nice pens that I hide because if I don't, goodness knows where they're going to end up. So basically there's a standard jug on my desk. It's an old-fashioned copper. It's a handmade copper mug that was given to me as a present years ago. I used to work in festival events, and there was a guy who used to come to town. He used to make these beautiful copper mugs, and that's full of Bic biros. It's full of blue, black, couple of green, and red Bic biros, and they're just up for grabs. So if they're there, I'll just use them. Yeah, not too precious about that one. So that would be Monday, Tuesday, Thursday and Friday. Get up bright and early. Love being up in the morning first before everybody else. I think that's a throwback to before I was a full-time writer. I wrote in the mornings before I went to work. I would generally be up before 5. I would generally be at my desk by 5, 10 past 5 at the latest. I don't get up as early as anymore. I get up an hour before everybody else, which is generally around 6:30, 7 o'clock. I will mooch around. I will have a think. I will have a cup of coffee, walk the dog back to the house. Then I will have the breakfast. And then I sit at the desk. And then Monday, Tuesday, Thursday and Friday, I will write. First of all, I will check emails just before I go down there. I will check emails in case there's anything that I need to do that I've forgotten about. I will do little bits like that. But generally, yeah, I write. During the day, I break and I have lunch with my husband, who's retired now. And then my writing day is over at around 3:30, thereabouts, because it's time to get dinner ready and it's time to collect my daughter from school and all of that. But a big part of writing is reading. So if I get to the end of the week and I've done what I need to get done, it may not be a word count. It may not be necessarily a chapter number. It'll be just what I need to get done that week. I might sit on a Friday and read a book, but we wouldn't tell our husbands that because they wouldn't need to know that, because that wouldn't be considered by writing by everybody, but it's an integral part of writing. So if I can squeeze in a little bit of extra reading in there, I will as well by the end of the week. Yeah.
So it's interesting that you're working week by week, but not to a word count. So at what point are you analysing what it is you need to get done the next week, and how are you bracketing up what it is that you need to do every day within that?
I generally bring out a book a year. My publisher, I've signed a 3-book deal with, so I know where I am. I know what my year is like. I know when my edits will be coming in. I know I have a fair idea of what I need to get done when. So I know that by May I need to deliver a book. And the other thing that really I have found very helpful for centering me and sort of fixing my year in terms of kind of how it's organised, another book, the 12-week year. I try to work in blocks of 3 months. And the blocks of 3 months mean that I can, at the beginning of the year, I know exactly how much I need to get done in that 3 months because I'm in the run-up to having to deliver a book by May. But in that time as well, I have to also figure in edits for the book that is coming, last minute edits. They'd be copy edits or whatnot. They have to just be checked and whatnot. They are also in that period. So you kind of have a fair idea that within 6 months you've got to produce a book. And while you might not have a word count every week, you know that if you don't get the words down, it will never get written. So you try and get it done as quickly as you can. Now, sometimes I'll have a book. I had the 2026 book written last November because I was just ahead of myself, but I wasn't happy with it. And so I procrastinated and I held it and I looked at it and I fiddled with it and I sent it to my agent and she looked at it and she said, yes. And we had a lot of changing around to do it. So by the third draft, I sort of spent quite a few weeks this year working on that. So I know that between then and May, I had to, get it in. But yeah, so it works. Okay, you kind of have a fair idea. Each book is different. You know, some writers will tell you they write mornings or evenings depending on the book. I would say each book is different in how you approach it and how the actual writing of it in terms of time. It'll also depend on what's going on around it. you know. But yeah, I wouldn't necessarily have a word count, but in my head, I know where I need to get to in terms of the end date. So I will have an end date for finishing it, I suppose. And I sort of, I'll do a lot more near the end date than I do at the beginning date.
Well, you said that women's fiction, uplifting fiction,
yes.
Tends to flow more. You don't need to plan everything out and have this thorough skeleton. Yeah. So what's happening? Is it on a Friday? Are you like, well, I've got an idea. This is what's going to happen next. This is where I want to get to by next Friday.
Yes, kind of. So I would start with the characters, and the characters will often lead the story generally. My last few books have been set in a fictional village called Ballycove. This time round, the new book was set in a fictional island off the Mayo coast called Pinhill Island. So I started with 3 characters. I knew that I wanted to write about a particular character, a particular house, a particular place. That character actually isn't even alive in the book. She has already died. Her daughter is alive, and she's a very elderly woman. And I knew where I wanted it to go, and I knew where I wanted that character's legacy to end up. And I suppose once I had that, and I had the island, it was like a clean slate, and that was exciting in some ways. And it also gave me lots of scope for kind of meandering down paths as I wrote. And those paths will often bring you to twists in the road of your plot. And if you follow them, you can either end up sinking at sea, or you can end up with a great story. And thankfully for me, I think I've ended up with a good story at the end of it. But yeah, so you start, I wouldn't say I don't have an entire plan, but I don't have, it's no whole bars when I get to the end of it. It could be completely different to how I started out. I'll have an idea of where I want things to end up. But sometimes people will die along the way, or as in characters, don't worry. Sometimes, interesting things will happen, and everything just changes all of a sudden. So I let the story lead me as opposed to leading it. It's not quite like writing crime fiction, where there are certain parameters within which you have to think in terms of the story, because readers would have certain expectations. There are many writers writing in the field that I'm writing in, and we all write differently, and we all have readers who have their own expectations around how we write, but within that, readers are very open to something different in a book, and I like that about women's fiction. I like the fact that by the end somebody may have died, and that can be okay. I like the fact that I don't write romantic fiction. The girl isn't always going to get the guy. Certainly there aren't too many billionaires floating around the west of Ireland for, fairly, it's fairly organic, but at the same time it changes as you go. And I suppose the more you edit, the more you go back, the more, the tighter it becomes, and the more that you become more focused on kind of where you're going. So you're not maybe letting it flow so much as kind of cutting it back.
Because it is so open and free-flowing, yet a reader knows what they want from a Faith Hogan novel. So what do you think that is? What do all your novels and the genre that you are writing in, what must they all have, if anything?
I think readers come back to my books because, particularly at the moment, we are living in a world that is changing quickly. Our news in the evenings, or wherever we get our news feeds from, are throwing up a lot of things that are making us, I will say, uncomfortable, but I think a lot worse than that. And I think people want to escape. And my readers have always come to my books to escape. And they escape to a place that is, I won't say everything works out well for everybody, but they are uplifting reads. And so when the reader finishes the book, I would hope that they would hug the book to their chest and say, oh, and that is my intention when I write the books, that I make the world for a reader a better place.
Knowing that, Faith, how much does that change at all what it is that you want to write about? I know that you've said that you enjoy the fact that with the genre, someone might die and that's okay. But knowing that a reader is probably coming to you because we're in a tumultuous world and they want something that will make them feel reliably good by the end of it, does that at all impact what it is that you might write about or how you might write it?
The first thing is, I suppose, my readers are, I would describe my fiction as grown-up women's fiction. So my readers are intelligent women. They know that if I'm writing about a character who is 90 years of age and they're living in a dilapidated house, that person is not going to take on a major remodel of their house and live to be 110. Okay? And while I'm not saying that, I think that people can be young in spirit, and I think that they can be interesting characters. I think that there's an expectation of reality in the books, and I think that there has to be a respect for the reader, that they are not they're not reading my books to read fantasy. They're reading my books to read about characters who seem real and who can become almost like friends while they're, I mean, when you read a book, Dan, you commit to it for a week. Some people will commit to it for more if there's, you know what I mean, if they just sort of take their time reading it. And so when you open one of my books, I think it's the characters that they really like. It's the characters that they resonate with. People will come back and say, I loved Esme, or I loved Constance, or very often, I had a man in my last book, the Bookshop Ladies, called Albie. And the number of readers who came back and said, oh my goodness. And he was just one of those people who in the village that he lived in just brought people to him, attracted people to him, because he was full of kindness and love and acceptance. And he had a huge big tortoise, which didn't hurt either, probably. But, yeah, and I think that's it. I think that, yes, real life happens. You know, we will all one day die. People become ill and they die. But for the most part, life can be uplifting. And I think that if you pick up a book and read certainly a Faith Hogan book, you want to be uplifted, you know, and yes, people die, but you know, sometimes when people die and if they've had good lives, it's not always a sad thing. It's a sad thing, but not in the same way that it can be if you know. I mean, if a thriller writer is writing it, or if it's in another genre, it can be written in a way that will evoke different emotions. But I think that my books are full of nature. They're full of they're just full of, I suppose, joy, and I hope, well, they're joy and kindness, and I suppose just a love of the environment around you and people and acceptance. And I think when you have that, I think passing away for somebody in a book, and it has happened in a number of my books where people have passed away, but I think it can be a joyful thing. I think it can be a joyful thing. It's a realistic thing, and people will cry, but by the end of the book, you are uplifted. I promise you're uplifted.
Just back to the day. So when you sit there in the morning, you're not doing a word count and you're kind of working across the week. Is there an aim for where you want to get to that day? Are you simply writing as much as you can before you need to pack up, get the tea ready and get your daughter from school?
No, not at all. No. I have a fair idea of what I need to get done. It's very hard to explain it when I think about it now, but in my head, I know exactly what I need to get done. It might be that I'm just moving a plot point forward. It might be that I've left sometimes I will leave somebody in a situation that's awkward for them, a character in a situation that's awkward for them. And I know I have to dig them out of that before I finish up. And sometimes I'll have finished that up, you know, earlier, and that's fine. And I won't go on to something else because it doesn't seem exactly maybe the thing to do. Sometimes it'll be halfway through a chapter. Sometimes it'll be the end of a chapter. It really depends on the book. It depends on where I am in the story. At the beginning of the story, the writing tends to flow, and I tend to get I can be writing very fast. At the end of the story as well, the writing really, I can be writing very quickly. And I'll almost, my heart will be racing because I'm coming to the end and there'll be whatever denouement is going to occur. But in the middle of the book, it can be slower and you sort of tend to kind of just take it as it comes. But you know that at the end of the day that there is a finish time. There is going to be finish time. You are going to have to say goodbye to the characters in the current format that they're in. And you're working towards that all the time.
And in that 6 hours of writing every day, when you're in your study without any Wi-Fi, how do you find your energy peaking and troughing? How consistent are you at just head down, fingers tapping away?
I suppose if I can get 3 days out of those 4 where I'm working really, really well, but often it's 2 days out of the 4. And 2 days out of the 4, I can do up on 5,000 words now. But if I do 5,000 words in a day, you can be guaranteed I won't be doing 5,000 words the following day, because if I was, it wouldn't be, I'd be deleting it again. It wouldn't be good enough. So while you might have a day that you do quite a lot of words and you're racing through it because something has happened in the plot and it's just flowing, there are days when it's not going to be as fast. I wouldn't see a kind of an ebb and a flow during the day. I do tend to take a lot of coffee breaks, which is probably not good for me. But at the same time, at the end of the day, I think that, and my watch, goodness, these technology things that I have a watch on my wrist that now tells me to get up and move every hour, which is highly inconvenient when you're in the middle of something. But so it's like any job, I suppose. I mean, any of us who have ever worked in an office, we all know what it's like to have the call of the water cooler, where you just want to get up and say hello to somebody, and it's a bit like that here, I suppose. You write and you get into it, but when you're kind of doing your best and you're sort of plodding it out and you're getting from A to B and you're not entirely sure what's happening, yeah, the lure of the coffee cup can be very, very intense indeed.
Back with more from Faith in just a sec. Now, if you're enjoying the show and if you'd like to support us, maybe we've helped out your writing life just a little bit, well, you can do that over on our Patreon page. It's a really easy way for you to support the show monthly, for you to keep a rolling pledge, which goes a very long way to helping us carry on bringing you these episodes as often as we can. So you can do that. Just a couple of dollars a month really helps out. Patreon.com/writers routine. Over there you get merch. There is bonus content too, and a way for your book to sponsor this show. Also, you'll get access to a little writing community that we've got there. Perhaps becoming a monthly backer isn't the best option for you. Well, that's fine. You can do it as a one-off, one and done over at Ko-Fi on ko-fi.com/writers routine. You can send over whatever you like. It will come through to me. And it's just, I'm very thankful that you would even think of doing that. For as much or as little as you like, one and done just helps me keep bringing you these podcasts whenever I can. So you can do that on Ko-Fi, and there's always the Patreon option as well, which you can find wherever you're listening. Let's get back to it then with Faith Hogan chatting about her new novel, The Women at Ocean's End. We get more into it and we delicately tread around the plot, hopefully without giving too much away. You can hear how the characters really drew her into this one. We discuss finding your voice, and we'll leap back in talking through, well, a life filled with many different jobs and career paths, and how that's all brought her to the point of finally being a full-time writer.
So I wrote all along. That was the thing, I suppose. But I wrote in secret because I always thought it was a kind of a strange and odd thing to do. I didn't know any writers. And so when I had my twins, I had twins, and I was off for a bit of time while I was pregnant with them, and I wrote a novel. What was, I suppose, in hindsight, a novel. It was around 80,000 words. It was a crime novel, and it was utterly crap. Okay. So it went into a drawer and I never thought about it again. And a few years later, I thought, well, I really should do something. If I can do it once, I can do it again. And I started writing in earnest. And I think it was 2013, I won a competition here in Ireland. It was run by the Irish Writers' Centre. And I got an opportunity to meet a lot of publishing people. And there was a lot of interest shown in the book that I had written at the time. Now, the book that I had written at the time was later thrown into a bottom drawer and never taken out of it again. But I suppose I got a lot of feedback that really sort of spurred me on. And I wrote another book, another crime novel, and this time I managed to I sent it out to agents, and eventually I got an agent who, I won't say eventually, she was one of the first people I really wanted. I had admired a number of her writers in the past, and I knew of her. I really thought that we would be a good fit, and she took on the book and she tried to sell it, and we did not sell it. And we kind of had a lot of over and back, and in the end she said, would you try writing women's fiction? Because she did have quite a number of women's fiction writers on her, and she didn't have anybody Irish, and she thought, well, give it a bash. So I gave it a bash, thinking that nothing would happen and it would just be an exercise in writing, and sure, it would be good for me, and whatnot. And she sold it. She sold it to Head of Zeus. It was a new imprint called Ari at the time. I was taken on by a lovely publisher, and I have been with them since. The books were sold initially in ebook format, But the sales on the ebook format surpassed expectations. And so they decided to bring the books out into bookshops, and we came out in original fiction format here, the larger format fiction here in Ireland, I think it was about a year and a half after the first book. And from there we have just gone on, and it's just been a great journey. We've been very lucky. We're translated, I think, into about 10 or 12 countries now. We've just been really, really, really blessed with it. And I'm still with the same agent, and I'm still with the same publisher. So, yeah, it's been a good story.
If you were always writing, and then when you were pregnant with the twins, you were writing just because you had more time, maybe a bit more consciously, was there any thought there at that point that, because again, you're doing lots of different jobs, right? So it's not like there is a quote unquote career path. Like you're doing whatever's available to a degree. So was there ever a thought that, hang on, maybe one day this is what I want to be doing and I could do that?
I think there was always a dream. I would love to do it, but there was never an expectation that I could. I had a degree. My first degree is in English literature and psychology. And at the time, I knew I would never teach. I think teachers are amazing, but I just don't think I'm cross enough to be a teacher. I don't think I'd have any semblance of order in a classroom. I think I'd be a terrible teacher. I would have a great love of the English language, but I really don't think I'd be able to get children quiet enough to actually pass it on to them. And that's why I ended up in mental health and in learning disability. I ended up because I had a degree in psychology as well in that area, but it afforded me a number of luxuries. Number one, to live in Mayo, in employment that paid me enough to, keep my family, rear my family, whatnot. It afforded me the opportunity to meet my husband in and out between it all. And but I suppose you do a job for so long, Dan, and there comes a point where you can do it quite well and you have time. And I had time to think and I had time to spend. And I read. I mean, I've been a huge reader, I suppose, like all writers. From the day I could kind of say my ABCs, I've been reading. And I always wanted to write. And I would have written, before I did the book and even right the way through, I would have written everything from poems to radio plays to, short stories and whatnot. But I suppose the dream was always to write a book, because the book is what I've always written. I've always read novels. They've always been my thing. So that's kind of, I wouldn't say that I ever thought it was possible. I certainly never expected to get published. I never expected to be a full-time author. But maybe that's why I'm so grateful for it now that I am,
You mentioned earlier that when you're starting a novel, you found that when it was crime, you had to plan it quite thoroughly.
Yes.
Whereas women's fiction tends to flow.
Yes.
Why do you think that is? I mean, I know that there are things that need to be in a crime novel. There are certain beat points that you need to hit, but why do you allow yourself this freedom with women's fiction?
I used to think that it was because I wasn't quite bright enough to write the crime novel without planning it. But I'm not so sure that was the case either. I don't know if my brain could have coped with doing, and you hear some brilliant crime writers and they sit down and they have no idea where the plot is going. I mean, I don't know how they do that. I don't think my brain could actually, you know what I mean? And I listened to interviews with you and with others where writers were these fantastic crime writers that I would hugely admire would talk about writing these books that they never plan. And I think I can't imagine. But I suppose in the same way that they would write those, I would write women's fiction. I wrote a book called The Ladies' Midnight Swimming Club back in around 2019, I think it came out. And I had not gone into the water to swim since I was probably a child. And I tend to close my eyes, actually, when I'm in the flow of it. And the words will just come out through my fingers. And I'm not so sure even how I do it. But sometimes, and some of the best writing that I think I've done has been with my eyes closed and just letting it flow out. And I suppose the editing process is where I put a shape or make to the story. So, my first novel that I 70,000 words when I was pregnant, that was very much a stream of consciousness thing. There was no beginning or ending. There was hardly even any direct speech in it. But it was one of those things that just sort of flowed. Now it was, as I said, nobody's going to want to read it, and I certainly wouldn't want them to. But yeah, and I think the women's fiction is like that. I think there's no better way to describe it, but that there's an alchemy when you sit in a room on your own and you have an idea for something and you just let rip. And it's very satisfying. But there is quite a lot of editing when I come to the end of it. I mean, I couldn't possibly send it to anybody in in that shape. It has to be, I have to go through it again. And my editor will go through it. And obviously I'll get edits from the publishers, but my agent will go through it. And there'd be quite a bit of work to do on it then. So I suppose when you start off that first draft, it is just basically letting it flow out of you. You have an idea of the characters. I know this situation I want them in. I have a fair idea where I want things to end up. But there's no guarantee they will end up that way. And if some calamity befalls somebody along the way, I wouldn't really have thought of that at the beginning. That is something that will evolve because the characters have gone down various routes and have done things that will have consequences.
Well, let's just tap into that beginning then. So the new novel is The Women at Ocean's End, Faith. Mm-hmm. Just tell us about the very first moment that this idea came into your head. What was the tiny seed that presented itself? I
wanted to write something different. I wanted to write something different. So I suppose there was two things. Number one, houses like Greenway, Agatha Christie's house in her lady novelist cottage by the sea, except for it's not a cottage. And I suppose I was inspired by the idea of that. I was inspired by the idea of a literary tradition being kept alive over the course of a long time. We have many wonderful female writers here in Ireland that have influenced many people, and there are many great festivals around the country that mark their lives and their work. And I suppose I just thought, I wonder, could I write about something like that, about somebody whose legacy still permeates the present day? And so Maggie Mackin was the first person who came into my head. And Maggie Mackin, the story is not about her. It's about her daughter Constance, who's now in her 90s. She lives in a very faded and dilapidated house on the far reaches of an island called Pinhin Island, which is loosely based on Achill Island, which is, I suppose readers will be familiar with it because it was featured in that movie, The Banshees of Inisherin. And the story is about Constance and about two other women who are brought together on the island at various stages of their lives. And it's about how they come together to help each other out of various difficulties. I don't really want to give too much away, Dan.
No, I get it. No, so don't worry about that at all. I'm just thinking about right at the start. So you've got this idea. Yeah. What are you doing to get to know the characters, to kind of have an idea of where you're heading before you start writing?
Well, Constance's voice I can hear in my head. I can still hear Constance's voice in my head, even though I've stopped writing her. I can still hear her in my head. I can still hear Roz in my head, one of the other characters. And I suppose, when you have a voice like that that's in your head, it's easy enough to know what they're going to say and what they're going to do. Her life, Constance's life is, she's in her 90s. So she lives in a house where she has limited mobility beyond that. She hasn't been to her mother's grave in 5 years. She hasn't really been around the island because the island, there isn't a public transport system. She can't walk from one end of it to the other because it's 12 miles long. She lives, and her main contact with the outside world really is the postman who comes and drops the post through every day, until she gets a phone call from her best friend's daughter, who now lives in England, who she hasn't really seen in about 40 years, who tells her that her mother would like to be buried on the island, and can she come and visit when she comes to the island. And of course, there's nowhere else to stay on the island because it's close season. So Constance offers her a bed. So I suppose that's kind of where it starts off. You get a voice in your head, and you kind of, it grows as it goes, if that makes sense. You put down, I mean, if you don't write, you can't edit. So you put down one word after the other. But generally there's a very strong sense of character in all of my books, and a strong sense of place, and they guide the story. I have a fair idea of what I want to write. I just don't know how I'm going to get to the end of it.
Because you're writing stories like normally quite centered around women in a certain place that you've invented over in Ireland. Do you ever worry that you find characters kind of blending into each other?
I don't think so. No, not. I mean, maybe you would, Dad, but no, I don't. I have found that. I think it's that whole thing with the voice. So the characters, and I suppose ages of characters as well makes a huge difference. Roz is very young. She's just finished a degree in environmental science. So she's at a very different place. Her voice is very different to Constance's. Constance is in her 90s. So her voice is very different. And they have different outlooks on life. They've had different experiences. Constance's experience in life is it's the core of the book, really. Her friendship, her experience, how she has dealt with challenges as a child, how she's overcome them, how she's managed to remain a positive person. And that very much comes across in her character. And I suppose it differentiates her from the other characters in this book, but also from the characters in other books, because her past experience is quite unique. She has had fairly intense trauma in her past, and she has done things that no other character in any of my books has ever done. And so she, so I think, and it's been the same with other books as well in the past. Each of the characters is drawn so that, I mean, the reader may not know exactly everything that's gone in their past, but I know exactly what has happened to them. And that, I think, gives them a flavour all of their own, that I can't mix them up with each other because they're so completely different,
I know that you don't thoroughly plan every single beat. So how much time do you give yourself before starting on something new, just to let things percolate away?
I will take quite a bit of the summer off. When you say beats, I think of the Save the Cash book. I remember reading that years ago, and I remember going down through it. And I decided to plan a novel with Beat the Cash, Kill the cat, save the cash, isn't that it? Save the cash, yeah. Oh gosh, yeah, the poor cash. But anyway, and I just couldn't write like that. I dumped it. I did write a piece of work that was a full-length novel, but it was soulless for me. It was just soulless for me. So I don't think I can write like that.
You've written quite a few novels now, and readers think that it's your voice that's your strength. We're always trying to find it. Well, at the very least, we don't start with our voice. What do you remember about a point where you thought, oh, that's what my voice is, this is where I belong, I've kind of got a hang of this now?
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but I don't know if there was actually a point. I think I have grown into my voice. I think that for many years I thought I should write like somebody else, as in other writers that I've read who I absolutely, truly admire, and I should be a little bit more like, or a little bit more like this writer or like that writer. And I think that the more that I have written, and I suppose that, each book, praise or success or sales, they kind of add to your confidence. And as years have gone on, I've become more confident in my own voice. And now I very much write as I speak, which is probably depressing for you now as you listen to me speak, because I ramble on here. But I don't try to cover over how I speak and how I write, if you know what I mean. And when I now look at other writers that I admire, I think, yes, they do the same. And the reason that I like them so much and I like their writing so much is because they write and have written as authentically as they speak, if you know what I mean. So if you pick up a Maeve Binchy book, you can hear Maeve Binchy in your ears. Actually, if you pick up a Graham Norton book, it's like having him in your head. And it's fantastic because he speaks beautifully and he writes beautifully, and I can hear his voice in my head when I'm reading his books. And it would be the same for Rosamund Pilcher. It would be the same for Kate Atkinson. It would be the same for all those writers that I would have admired over the years. And and I think there came a point where I don't know if I wrote as authentically when I started out, but I think that once I really, really started to write and find myself in the writing, I think as the time has gone on, I think I've become more confident of my own voice, if that makes sense.
That is it for this week's Writer's Routine with Faith Hogan. Thank you so much to Faith for coming on the show. The book is The Women at Ocean's End. You can get a copy right now. Use the link for our bookshop.org page. If you do it there, a bit comes to me and to your local independent bookshop as well. So it does some good. Thank you to Faith. Now, remember, we're sponsored this week by Faber Academy, a brilliant resource for you to hopefully drastically improve how you work. It'll give you a real foot in the door to getting something published as well. Find the link in the episode notes where you're listening, and I will see you next week with a brand new guest on the podcast. Until then, thank you for listening.